Good morning and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by Get Go Cafe and Market, where Dale, as always, they have great options, fresh food, cold drinks. It's hot out here, Dale. You can step right inside of Get Go and get your fix on real quick.
Absolutely, and they've again been open through this entire situation with great food at good prices. If you haven't gotten there yet, get the Get Go.
Absolutely. Speaking of prices, Dale, what's happening with the salary cap in the NFL? I don't get it. I don't think most people do, but you've been doing some digging and some research. And what are some of the things that we should be expecting with how this is going to play out?
Well, here's the deal, and this is one of the reasons why they had to continue having negotiations. Friday, the NFLPA and NFL agreed that they would take any losses that are incurred during this season with no fans in the stadiums, and they would spread it over the next 4 years. What that means is that the salary cap for this year is going to remain the same. It's going to be $198.2 million, which is what that's good news to every team because they don't have to cut anybody to get under the cap. Where it gets interesting is in 2021. Let's assume right now that there are no fans in any stadiums all season long. The least or the lowest the cap can go in 2021 is 175 million. I know people are looking at that number and they're freaking out. That's the lowest that it can go. It can't go any lower than that. That's the floor. Chances are it's probably going to come in higher than that.
Right.
Because they're going to have fans in stadiums in a bunch of different places. They're going to have the extra teams in the playoffs this year. Maybe they make a deal with a gambling company. The players also get the windfall from any monies raised through that as well. So let's say instead the cap comes in at 185 million or something like that. Well, there's still going to be a number of teams that are above the cap. This is something that the league could negotiate. They could get together after the season and renegotiate again to decide. Hey, if it is at 175 million, for example, right now there are 14 teams who are over that cap for 2021. Before they make a move this offseason, they are considerably over, including the Philadelphia Eagles, who are $100 million over that cap.
Right. Whereas like the Steelers are only like $14 million.
They're about 14 or 15 million over. Yeah.
Which is
If it comes in a little bit higher than that, then it eases the pain a little bit. But here's the problem. Even though there are 14 teams who are over that cap right now, there are another 6 or 7 teams who, even though they aren't over that cap, they're kind of over it already because base salaries go up next year. You got to be able to sign your rookies. You got to be able to make any kind of move. So really about 20 teams out of the 32 are essentially over or right at that cap. They're going to have to cut guys to get, to make any moves during the offseason. The NFL and the NFLPA don't want that. Right. They don't want particularly the NFLPA doesn't want teams to have to go out and cut a bunch of veteran players when there are no landing spots for these guys. It would be an extreme buyer's market for the teams that do have salary cap. And there's just not going to be enough cap space to go around for those guys to get the same kind of contracts that they currently have. So yeah, and I expect something to happen after the season where that gets renegotiated yet again to kind of ease the losses a little bit. And maybe the numbers will come in. Not right now, they're looking at worst case scenario. That's what they have to look at. But I expect that salary cap to be somewhere. If it doesn't, it's probably not going to go down the $20 million that we're looking at now. It's probably, if it does go down, it's more like in the $5 to $10 million range.
And that's something that's more manageable because if it is something that is to the 20 million range, you're talking about those players getting cut and how it's bad for the league, but also think about free agency period. It's going to be nuts. And at the same time, everyone has less money to spend. It's going to be like a fire sale on like talents that, maybe like a Bud Dupree, who is a really talented player, but a franchise, the Steelers can't afford to keep him when they had to afford to keep everybody else. Now some team's going to get him for even cheaper. So I agree. I'm really interested to see how the NFL plays this. It does make a whole lot of sense that next year they could be looking at just redoing it all again, because who knows? If the hit isn't that bad, they might just be like, you know what? We don't need this plan. Let's come out with a less aggressive plan.
And here's the other thing I think people are kind of missing. You could see the NFL use this as a negotiating tool as well to say, hey, we're going to go to 17 games. Why don't we just do 18? we'll increase revenues here, and we won't have to lower the salary cap. This is all negotiating ploys. People are going to freak out about this stuff, but on both sides of this, neither side wants the salary cap to go down $20 million. That's the bottom line.
All right, Dale. The day that we were given, was it a month ago, little bit of time ago, was July 28th. And that's, oh my goodness, it's tomorrow. NFL players report. That means we're getting all the action, all the things. There's going to be hitting. There's going to be running. Wait, there's none of that happened, right? It's just players just showing up.
Yeah, players are going to show up. And as we saw in the what was agreed to last week, they're going to have to be tested. They're going to be tested Tuesday when they show up. And then they're going to be tested. They're going to go home. They're going to have to monitor themselves, keep themselves on lockdown, and then they're going to be tested again a few days later. And that's if they come in clean, at that second test, then they're going to be allowed inside the team facilities. The NFL is being very, very, very
meticulous,
cognizant in particular of what they're doing here, because they don't want guys showing – they know, hey, we know there are going to be guys who show up and test positive. That's just the reality of the situation that we're living in. What they don't want is to allow a guy who tests positive to then have access to the rest of the team.
Right.
And so you have to put those guys on lockdown. I think we already saw today there were 6 young players who have showed up and showed up at their team facilities, tested positive. They're on isolation right now and won't be cleared to come back and return until they, don't test positive again. So it's going to be interesting to see. But we do know this, that even though teams are going to be back at their facilities, now players are going to be at the facilities, we're not going to see them on the practice field before August 17th. That's what's written into this new rule. They're going to have 14 days to practice to get ready for the field, 14 padded practices, and then they're going to start playing games.
So let me get this straight. They're going to be in the facilities. So that means they'll just be working out and just like watching film?
Working out, having meetings, some virtual meetings. It's almost like OTAs are going to be jammed into this first couple of weeks of August, and then they're going to go straight from OTAs into padded practices.
How much do you think this impacts the quality of play for the NFL? I know that's probably the question.
There's going to be any doubt that it's going to impact the play, Chris. And you think about it from this perspective. You're the Bengals. And Joe Burrow's he's your starting quarterback. You don't have anybody else. He's going to have 14 padded practices, no preseason games, and essentially a month to get ready for what's going to be his rookie season in the NFL. This first month of the season is going to be really sloppy, and it's really going to favor, as we've talked about before, it's going to favor the teams that didn't have a lot of turnover. For example, you can't look at this any other way and don't think that the Steelers aren't going to have an advantage in that first month of the season. They've got everybody back. Everybody is, even the guys who were fighting for new starting jobs at right tackle, let's say at nose tackle, they're guys who've been in the system.
Right.
They can pick up right where they left off last year, especially defensively, and say, hey, we're going to run these blitzes from the get-go. And, for example, a guy like Daniel Jones in the opener, a guy, a quarterback who's essentially got less than a full season of starting experience under his belt, he's going to be under the gun. Most teams, think about the Browns. They get an entirely new coaching staff coming in there. Things are going to have to be very vanilla for those teams. They're going to have to play a lot of, base cover 2 and things of that nature until they get everything a little more, everybody into the system a little bit more. They've got 2 new starting safeties up there, new linebackers, all this stuff. So it's really going to favor the teams that have a lot of continuity.
And don't forget offensive lines, because that is one of the biggest things. Communication amongst all 5 guys is so important, not just for the false starts and the holdings, but for accounting for gaps with different blitz calls and different switch calls. We're talking about Joe Burrow. That offensive line is extremely young. They drafted, Jonah Williams last year. He was hurt all season. So
this will essentially be his rookie year. Yeah,
exactly. You're getting him, Billy Price, all these young guys that are still trying to figure out how to play in the NFL, let alone play together. And they're protecting the first overall pick quarterback that only had like a month or less to prepare. That could be a lot of problems early on. And again, that's still not even accounting for people being in shape to get in football shape, which is only going to be, like you said, 14 padded practices. This is certainly going to be very testing on the players in the NFL for who is going to be ready. Dale, the blockbuster NFL news over the weekend was the New York Jets finally trading their safety Jamal Adams to the Seattle Seahawks for 2 first-rounders. Now, I believe the Jets
and they got Bradley. They gave up a fourth. The Jets gave up a 4th-round pick, but they got Bradley McDougald back, who's actually a pretty good player.
He is. He's a good player. But it's interesting to me because now this trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, I mean, before we already said, like, the Steelers made out with it. But now it's like, wow, Jamal Adams got 2 firsts, and he's a box safety. He's not your typical, drop back and play cover 1, cover 3, all the deep kind of coverages that Minkah does. And they're both the 2 All-Pro guys that made the NFL's All-Pro list at safety this year. Does this kind of make it kind of even more laughable at what the Steelers did to make out with Minkah Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, and the other part of the equation with Jamal Adams, one of the reasons why he wanted to trade it was because he wants $20 million a year. He wants a big contract as well, and he's much closer to free agency than Minkah Fitzpatrick is. I think he's got 1 year left on this deal, and then he gets his 5th-year option. So, I can't look at this and think that the Steelers didn't make a much better deal than what the Seahawks did. Jamal Adams is a very good player. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But this just goes to show that the people who thought, well, the Steelers should be in the market for Jamal Adams or they should try to do this, it just wasn't going to happen. You're not going to give up 2 first-round draft picks for a guy. The Ravens weren't going to do it. They couldn't pay him either. Some of the other teams, the Cowboys, it just wasn't going to happen. The Seahawks, I guess, are find themselves in a different cap situation. They always do some strange things in Seattle.
No, I agree.
No, it's some of it has worked and some of it hasn't, but I don't know that they were a safety away from being a very good football team. I think they're an okay team. I don't think they were a safety away. Again, I think McDougald was a good player. They get a great one now in Jamal Adams, but man, they gave up a lot to get that pick, to get that player, and it's going to cost them a lot of money as well.
Yeah, it's going to cost them a lot of money in those 2 first-round picks over the next 2 years. Now, this gives the Jets 3 first-round picks over the next 2 years. You're talking about ammunition for if they don't like how Sam Darnold continues to progress, or if Adam Gase finds himself getting fired, the new coach might be like, all right, using these picks, we're getting whoever's Trevor Lawrence or whoever is at the top of the list that year for quarterbacks. It's going to be very interesting payout. But
it goes back to, Chris, one of the things, if they happen to decide, well, hey, we'd rather have Trevor Lawrence than Sam Darnold, that puts Sam Darnold on the open market. He would be a guy I'd be very interested in long term if I'm the Steelers.
Right, because that's a franchise quarterback, a guy that was drafted to be a franchise quarterback that you could look at there. But Dale, let's look at a funnier side of this situation, because when Jamal Adams left, Le'Veon Bell started tweeting out, and he was saying it's all the guys who are hooting and hollering to try to get you in here, and then they tell you one thing, and then they're gone. And then Jamal Adams is like, okay, whatever, I'll see you week 14. And Le'Veon Bell's like, you lied to me. You told me you told me that this to believe in this team, and now you're gone. And it seems like he's poo-pooing because he's now stuck with Adam Gase and the Jets and their hopelessness for the upcoming season. Meanwhile, Steelers fans are kind of sitting here like, Le'Veon, did you forget how things ended?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody looks at their own situation the way they look at it. I'm sure Le'Veon, he probably doesn't see it that way. But right. I know a lot of his former teammates felt that he lied to them. So, what comes around goes around.
Yeah, it's a perfectly thing. And hey, man, I remember when he was doing contract negotiations. I remember seeing comments from people like Franco Harris, Jerome Bettis, Hines Ward, like, hey, you don't win these holdout battles. Just work with the Steelers. You'll get what's coming for you. And he didn't, and now he's got what's coming for him. So certainly a funny thing there. Dale, always great talking with you, man.
You too, Chris.